Welcome to the cityCURRENT radio show. I'm Andrew Bartolotta, Director of Digital Media here at cityCURRENT, and we are diving into the world of storytelling, raising boys, entrepreneurialism, and creativity today with author, creative, savvy storyteller, and my friend, Tim Nicholson. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's so much fun to actually see your face again.
You've spent years telling stories to help clients and friends find creative solutions to their problems. But before we dive into your new book, what are some lessons you've learned along the way in terms of storytelling and humanizing a brand to be relatable to your audience?
There are a couple of things that I've learned really even recently about my approach to storytelling. And the first of those is allow yourself to be personal. Let the story be personal. Often in my storytelling in the past, I would take somebody else's anecdote and try to apply some lesson that we might have learned from it. And a lot of people, see those lessons in things, and maybe other people are using some of those same anecdotal moments to, tell similar stories from, but they don't have your story. They don't have your life experience, and even no matter how exciting or how boring you think your life has been, it is an original story. And so be willing to share that. I think that's really important. I think the other thing for me has been you don't have to hit people over the head with what it is you're trying to convey. Most people are really smart and they understand the message, and they might have a better interpretation of the story than you because they have an interpretation that's more relevant to them than you could possibly know. You can't have their life experience. Their story's their story, your story's your story. How you fit into theirs or the thing that you're sharing with them, how they might apply that. Let them take that and do with it as they will. Now, I was listening to some music this morning, and it was Tom Petty, who's sort of an inspiration to me as a storyteller. And Tom Petty was covering a song by Carole King. But if you didn't know it was a Carole King song, you would have sworn it was a Tom Petty song because he took her story and told it through his voice and it became his. So people can tell other people's stories if they're great storytellers. And I think the way he did that is he got into her life experience and he let that story be hers and then became her. He played the part of her. But in my own storytelling, it is simply let yourself be who you are and let the chips fall where they may in terms of acceptance of that story.
I love that. Now, speaking of storytelling, when we work together, you'd hold weekly pep talks to help inspire our team, encourage others to lean in and share what others learned recently about life and work and beyond. Now, one that sticks out to me to this day is your story on free samples, which is inspired by a Baskin-Robbins pink spoon that we all love when we go in and get our favorite ice cream flavor. Can you give our listeners a short synopsis of this pep talk?
Well, it's especially really still very much alive in my visual, plane because I'm lactose intolerant. So to have an experience with a dairy product is, not always something you want to share with others. And so I was on my way to get to tell a story. To Merle Purvis there in Memphis, had tracked me down in a Target store, and you and I and some others had done some interesting things in the community with a wall about wellness and then a toothbrush thing that we did. And she had invited me to come down on some Sunday evening and tell that story a little bit. But I had a lot of free time. So I stopped into Baskin-Robbins for reasons I can't explain, other than now I know it was for this story. It was to get this story. So I stop in and order what my wife always orders, and because that's all I knew to get, because I don't eat ice cream. And the woman behind the counter asked me if I'd like a free sample of some other things, and so she began to give me some samples. And my single scoop turned into a triple scoop, which I couldn't possibly eat. But the thing that really I was inspired by was that I would not have known what those things were had she not reveal them through that invitation. Hey, would you like a free sample? This is our work. This is the work that you're not going to sample of mine today. You came in and you bought this sample, but here's some other samples of my work. I'm willing to let you get a free taste of that. And so a lot of the people that I was working with back at that time were especially curious about how they could get their work recognized. And I explored this idea of offering free samples of that. That there are things that you do in the workplace, and there might be other things that you wish you could do in the workplace. Why not do those things? And people would say, well, I'm not paid to do that. And so, well, those are free samples. Let people see your work so that they can associate you with that product. I now associate Baskin Robbins not only with mint chocolate chip, but with double fudge and double mint. And with all due respect to them, which I'll never eat, but they were beautiful samples. Now, one of the things that's happened with that story, though, over time is people have said, well, Tim, I work for somebody and I'm giving away free samples every day because I'm doing someone else's job. And the thing that I really just wanted to encourage them with is those aren't your samples. If you're doing somebody else's work, you're doing somebody else's work. Those aren't your samples. You should not be doing those for free. If somebody's asking you to do something for them, there's value there and you need to be paid for that value. But if your only way into the market is to advertise your work through a free sample, then do that. I know that here in the shop that we're opening in Austin, there's a little symbol that's become important to us, and it's the plus sign. And that plus sign is about, what can we add? What are we here to do? Are we here to take from this community, or are we here to give something to this community? And we genuinely are here to try to find a way to add value to this part of town that we're in, and to the people that we meet and the lives of the people that we meet. There may be transactions, but we're really interested in relationships. That's why we opened a shop when everything screams just be digital. We are digital, but we're opening a shop because we wanted to have real in-person interactions. And so that plus sign has made its way onto a t-shirt and some other merchandise. And at least, for as long as we can afford to do this, when people come to the store, they'll get a gift for coming to the store, and it'll be that message on a t-shirt. It's just a plus sign. People have already asked me about, what it means to show up and to add value. And I want to be careful to note that, frankly, for many people, just showing up is value. You're enough. Bring yourself, be you. That's all you need to add. Just add you. That's positive. So we've gone through this whole cycle of, stopping to get ice cream when I never get ice cream, and you pick up and you learn this little life lesson, and you try to share that with others, and people want to understand, well, how does that fit now in today's economy? It's still relevant, but know that you're enough. Adding you's enough. What you bring is enough. And if that thing that you bring and want to bring is not available, or is not being seen by others, do it anyway. You might consider it a free sample. You might just consider it you being you.
I love that. That's great. Who knew just some free samples and a pink spoon and ice cream could really transform into a story that's being told, almost a decade later.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I love that. That's cool. We talked about you being a storyteller, and you've recently published a book, Growing Guys the Early Years, which is a first in your collection of four about being a guy raising boys and friendship among men. Why did you think these stories needed to be told, and what can readers learn from reading these stories?
Well, I, I needed to tell the stories for my own sake first. They are bouncing around in me, and I've shared them with my sons, shared them with other guys, and I just needed to tell this. I needed to get the stories off my chest. uh, they're all sweet stories so far. It could get more interesting as the further we get into the series of four that we're working on. But it was important for me to do that, and also important for me to acknowledge these other. Sometimes they were boys, that were my friends, and sometimes it was a parent or a coach, or maybe it was grandparent, but things that you could see being modeled in other men. And I know that we live in a time where there are a lot of behaviors that men have practiced over the years that weren't acceptable then, and certainly are being called out now as they should be if they're still being practiced. But there are a lot of uh, simpler, sweeter values that do stand the test of time about just manhood. And I think in particular, it's the idea that uh, manhood can be gentle, and that it's not about bravado, it's not about physical strength, that it can be about caring, about time, about humor, about failure. Um, I go public here, I guess, with this story. And when over the last 5 years or so, I've recognized that I struggle with anxiety, um, and some of that has to do with maybe the pressures that guys put on themselves, and some of it is more um, is less in my control. We can manage the amount of pressure we put on ourselves, but there are some forces that live, in us genetically that we have to get help with, and that sometimes telling these stories is a way to help yourself. For me, so I particularly like going back and reminiscing about people that were supportive of me without when they didn't know it. People that taught me lessons that I didn't really recognize at the time they were teaching. Um, Things that I hope that I'll be able to pass along to others. Things that I hope that guys will feel comfortable passing along to their guy friends. Really trying to find a way for guys to go ahead and have the kind of conversations that many of us wish that we've been having for years.
You're sitting in your new storefront in Austin, Texas. It's called Brother Friend. It's really an experience for men to find handcrafted goods and artisan wearables. What inspired you to launch this, and talk about the collaboration with your family on this project?
Yeah, it's quite a thing. I feel really blessed to have their support. When we uh, worked together back in the agency life, um, even before then, I'd had this dream that I'd shared with my wife. It said, "Hey, when I retire, I want a little shop that sells jeans, t-shirts, makes a really good cup of coffee, and just play records and read books. And if people come in and they want to listen to the records or drink some coffee or buy a pair of jeans, great. But if they don't, I'm retired, and I'm just going to be living my life." So we during the pandemic, we decided that we would sell our house in Austin. Austin's market, I understand Memphis is having a little hot spell too. Austin's market has been hot for 10 years, but it's especially red hot right now. And we decided we would take advantage of that moment and sell our house, knowing that we really weren't going to find the next place yet, uh, for the same reasons we were selling. Selling at top of market for sellers meant we would be buying at top of market for sellers, and we made that mistake once in life. Plus, we're going to do that again. So we decided that we were going to find a place just to rent and kind of cool out for a little while. We were blessed to have downsized a few times and understand how to make that work. And my wife found this live workspace in Austin. And she said, "Hey, that little thing you want to do when you retire, that you have this store and you live above it, you want to test drive it?" Uh, well, yeah, I'd love to test drive it. Where? And so she showed me the spot that I'm sitting in now. And we live in the about 1,000 square feet above it. We work in the 1,000 square feet that I'm sitting in now. It's me and Susie and our dog Sunny, Lone Star, on Instagram. And my son who lives here in Austin, who actually, we made our first trip to Austin together 9 years ago today, when we made that first trip together. And we're just reminiscing about that some this morning. He's a musician here, but he's wanted to do something together with us, and he's been very instrumental in helping get this thing put together in the time frame that we have. So, it's predominantly a men's shop built around some men's experiences. Just the day in the life of a man, just grooming. Uh, Hopefully, find a little time to read. Hopefully, find a little time to maybe listen to some good music. Putting on your favorite pair of jeans, or wearing a comfortable pair of boots, and just hanging out. And so our next step with this thing is to create those moments intentionally and open them up by invitation to people to come in and have those kinds of experiences. And we do expect there will be transactions. That's how business works. But we're building the business around the relationship between people, what we can learn from them. So we've kind of designed the opening more like it's a bit of a pop-up kind of a model. There's a reduced inventory level because we don't want to make the assumption that our market research and our own intuition and taste are the prevailing ones, that we're going to learn from this place where we are, that there are going to be some things different that they would enjoy, that people would enjoy, and we'll bring that into our space. So it's a privilege to be able to do this. I still have a consulting practice around branding and marketing and storytelling, and we'll continue to do that. Uh, and this I would say to anybody who's thinking about starting something new. Starting something new doesn't mean quitting something that's current. When I started the agency that we had in Memphis for 15 years, I was already a bivocational worship pastor, right? And so when I did that, when we started that, I now had 3 jobs. And I don't think everything's about work. I wasn't working 100 hours a week, but I had 3 things that I was responsible for, because there were 3 facets of me that I wanted to have out in the world. 1, and to experience about the world. 2, and that frankly I needed to make a living and couldn't make the living I needed to support my family on one of those things alone. So this space is not about the next 10 minutes or the next 10 weeks or the next 10 months. It's really about the next 10 years and me getting to that retirement thing that Susie and I originally talked about. And then if my youngest son, who's helping get this thing going with me, if he still loves it, that's his.
You're creating your legacy every day, but what would you like others to say about Tim C. Nicholson decades from now?
Oh my goodness! So that might have been the question on the list that I would have said, "Don't ask me that question." He never stopped growing. Owned his mistakes. Tried to learn from them. Tried to help other people learn from them. Made a genuine effort to give back. Might have been misunderstood. I think that's. You might remember a few years ago we did this thing around bitchy resting face, and sort of the accidental message that sometimes gets sent just because of the way people are configured, right? And I think that for me, there are times that the way that I happen to be configured project a certain image into the marketplace that's not necessarily the real me. It might look like a certain thing or might be perceived as acting in a certain way, which maybe that's part of why I do the storytelling I do too, is I'm hopeful that if I could get my heart out ahead of whatever the rest of my image is. And so maybe that's the legacy too. You, on the other hand, you are joy personified. Your face, your laugh, your voice, your work ethic, your values, just joy personified. I don't want to project a legacy onto you, but for me, you are always the high five that we exchanged, 7 or 8 years ago out on some Memphis street somewhere.
Yeah.
Andrew JPEG, and that meeting, you were constantly that guy, and love you for that, and that consistency has served you well and all of us well to be inspired by. But for me, maybe it's my legacy was if you checked his heart, he was a man who wanted to know and serve you.
Very well said. And I think that you said it very well. And if you asked anyone on the street that knows you, they would say those things. So great answer. Tell listeners where they can learn more about you, brother, friend, or any other projects that you're working on.
Well, I'm excited about the little book for the things that I think it can mean between father-son moments. You know, the stories are written to be about a minute and a half long when you're just reading them. I've facetiously talk about the places and times that, you know, men might find it convenient to read that book. But I really wanted men to be able to share that book with their sons, you know, just to, and it to open up a conversation with them about what's it mean to be a guy, you know, it reminds me of a story of when I was a young man, or it reminds me of a story when you were a young man, is talking to his older sons. That I have no idea where that book will lead us, except I hope that will lead a lot of men to have different kinds of conversations than they might have planned on having with their sons, and that ultimately some of the stories will teach us about different kinds of conversations that men ought to be having in our relationships with women. You know, I'm a huge fan of women in business. I think you may know that from
Yes.
our life together and some of the clientele that we serve. But you know, I can be a fan of Humphrey Bogart and I can be a fan of Emily Wolfe at the same time. Both a bit rebellious and both pioneers in what they do, and both able to emote in a certain way that compels others to want to tune into what it is they're doing and saying and being. And us guys need to embrace that, you know, too. So to learn more about that book, it's on blurb.com because I did self-publish it. I was notified by them that it was in the top 5 children's books, which was such a delight, because there's even though it's written before those father-son moments, it's not necessarily styled like a children's book. Uh, though it could be if there's an illustrator out there somewhere who would like to talk to me about illustrating those stories. But I think that's fun. Brother Friend Life will be getting a bit of a makeover on social media as we're about to open the store up, and I hope that you'll be able to see some of those moments there, like we're talking about. And brotherfriend.com is the storefront. So I'm also all over the social, as Andrew would tell you, on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn as Tim C. Nicholson. Um, and if I could just add, you know, maybe something getting back to sort of the very beginning of this, I think where we talked about being personal and the stories being personal. I've been taking a little bit of a different approach to the LinkedIn world to where the stories I tell, my posts are short stories, and they are much more personal than they used to be. Uh, that doesn't mean, guys, that there are tears shed, you know, in these stories. I think when guys hear the word personal, it means, well, am I supposed to cry? You know, no, it means we're supposed to be real,
Right.
and that real is okay. Real is really the very best. You know, we've done enough virtual for the last year, and if I hear that word one more time, I think I'm going to hit end on any meeting I'm in. But real is really the best, and the response that I get to real versus, you know, trying to preach some lesson is real, is quite satisfying. And even whether it shows up as likes or not on a post, I'm not necessarily interested in. It's those messages that people drop to me, you know, DMing me messages about that they're afraid to leave in public, interestingly enough, which is telling me something about, you know, what's beginning to resonate. And maybe us, maybe some of men of my generation and some other men, maybe one of the things that the last few years coming through the pandemic and being more sensitized to social injustice and you know, some of the things that are going on in the way we care about the world that we're in, maybe just being more aware of that has made us has sensitized us to this idea that we should be participating in conversations like this, even if we're not yet comfortable doing it in public. Find a place you can have it. And so often guys are jumping into my DMs asking about the things that are in those stories and telling me their own stories. And that's very satisfying, much more satisfying than I'll take 5 of those over 50 likes, because it's personal.
Real is the best way we can show up in our lives and through other people. So, Tim, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to continuing to learn from you how to bring some more joy into the space I'm in.